What's up, guys? Welcome back to the shop. Today's video we're going to be making a knife out of fish hooks. If you remember, previously I've already made a small cleaver out of fish hooks, but I did that with a sand mine. So this time I decided that I was going to order some fish hooks and I wanted to do a chef's knife, but no sand mine, just strictly the fish hooks. And I want to see what kind of pattern I'd get out of it. So first thing I gotta do is get all my fish hooks together and get them nice and clean. And I do this very carefully. That's why I'm wearing gloves, just to help me from stabbing myself too quickly. And next thing I'm going to do is put in some acetone just to get whatever kind of outer coating or oil or whatever kind of debris might be on there from whenever it was made or shipped or whatever. And afterwards we just separate it and let the alcohol dry off, and we should be good to go. And for this video, I'm planning to make a chef's knife, probably 7-8 inches. And as always, we're going to be using our canister. It's already been pre-prepped with some white spray paint. And I'm just going to funnel everything in there and try to get in there as best as I can. It is a little bit of pain to get it in there because the fish hooks, they get stuck together, so they clump. So it is a bit of a pain to get it in there. But after I managed to get it all in there, a couple taps, and it actually sets in there pretty well. And to fill in all the nooks and crannies, we're using our Maritime Knife Supply steel powder. I use this in pretty much all my builds, so maybe I should talk to them about sponsoring this stuff, because this powder is getting pretty expensive, if you know what I mean. Most knife maker stuff and materials is getting pretty expensive nowadays. So maybe I should hit them up, or maybe they should hit me up if they're watching this video. That'd be pretty cool. But afterwards, I just seal it up and weld on my cap. Whenever I weld my caps on, I always leave a decent sized little gap. I know a lot of other makers, they drill a hole in the top to relieve pressure. I just leave a gap in my weld. I haven't had any issues with that, so I figure it's a lot easier than having to do that. And it does release all the gases regardless, so it does a pretty good job. And I learned that because my welds were pretty crappy and I was having the powder, blow out. Whenever it's in the forge, it kind of just almost like one of those Roman candle. Actually, no, it's the sparklers that we use for, New Year's or 4th of July. You know how it makes those sparks? Well, you get those same sparks coming out from the canister wherever you make your hole. And those sparks stop once you run out of oxygen, so there's nothing really to push out. And that's basically why we need our hole, to relieve that pressure, make sure it doesn't, just balloon up. And as always, we get a nice clean release thanks to our prep on the canister with the white spray paint. And we're just going to start working out this billet. One thing that I did notice while I was stretching out this billet is that the ends really broke apart. And that can be due to very many reasons. Normally they do crack like that, and they crack on basically every canister that I've ever made. The edges crack, but this one cracked quite a bit more than usual. So I decided to cut off the ends and clean up all that cracks and all that stuff with the grinder. That way we could get a nice clean working material to be able to ensure the minimal amount of cracks in our blade. And this extra step really does help out, especially with whatever material we're using. So with that done, we're moving on to our hammering, and I'm just gonna forge in the tip by hand. I would use the hydraulic press, but I kind of over press it. It's a little too strong for this, so I end up just always kind of using my hammer. Maybe I should figure out how to make a die for that specifically. But oh well, the workout is welcome since I don't hammer too much. Thanks to the hydraulic press, I do a lot of the heavy work with that. But regardless, once we get it starts to get its knife shape and it's starting to look a little bit like what we're trying to get to. I always try to hit that edge point and try to get it as clean as possible. But that transition isn't always as clean as we would like. But it's not that big of an issue. I mean, one thing that I've learned while knife making for this long is that trying to get it to be exactly perfect doesn't always, it's not very productive. So sometimes it's better just to kind of forge it to whatever shape you need, and be a little bit messy, it's fine, but forge it to the relative shape that you need, and then go through and do the final touch-ups, which is truing up your edges and whatever waves and all that good stuff that's going to be in the knife from all the forging and all the messing around. So here I ended up cutting off my excess material, and I'm going to be starting on my tang portion. This knife will be a hidden tang, and I believe I got a good amount of material for that, and I'm just forging it down with the hammer. The hydraulic press really is only good to a certain thickness, and afterwards the hammer is the best option to be able to draw out and fine tune the tang. So now I move down to drawing out my width on my knife. I got this new hammer that I ordered on Instagram from another maker, and it is a cross peen, and I'm using it to draw out the width on my knife. Having a solid hammer, especially if you're new, making the investment into a good hammer if you have the money. If not, modify hammers like I've said before. But if you have the money to buy a good hammer that's made specifically for this, trust me, it definitely levels up your work and makes the experience a lot more enjoyable. And this hammer gave me just that. It made drawing out the blade a lot easier, a lot quicker, and a lot more enjoyable. And just having a nice solid hammer works way better than using the cheaper hammers from the store. I could definitely feel it on the rebound. I would feel through the handle. I felt none of that with the new hammer, but with the old hammer I would feel those vibrations and going up my arm. So it's definitely a superior product. And if you're interested in getting one of your own, the guy has a pretty good deal going on, and I believe it's still going on. He's making them for $100 a hammer, which is actually a very, very good deal. So if you want to check out his work or order yourself a hammer, I'll leave his Instagram in the description, and feel welcome to go and check out his stuff. And if you order something from him, let him know I sent you. But all in all, trust me, a good hammer is definitely going to be a game changer for forging. A good anvil, a good hammer, and some way to grind off the material and heat up your material is basically the most important things that you need. The beginner stuff you need, a hydraulic press and other fancy machinery you probably get as you get along. But for just regular forging, man, a good hammer makes a hell of a difference. Like the hammer that I'm using right now is an Alex Steel Co. hammer I bought about 3 years ago. And beforehand, I was making, leaving a lot of dents and leaving a lot of marks that would take a lot of time of grinding and extra wear and tear on my machines to be able to clean up. And thanks to this hammer and obviously, getting better at doing the job, I save a lot of time on my grinding, and I save a lot of, materials. Belts don't wear out as fast either. But that's just food for thought in case you are a new knife maker and you're thinking about leveling up your game. That's definitely an option. And here I'm just fine tuning the knife and getting it ready for our profiling. Alright, so we're done with our forging. This is what it looks like. And you can see the different markings coming through. So that's pretty cool. And hopefully that's the actual markings that are in there. It doesn't really matter because once I grind it, it's going to change. But so far so good. It's looking pretty cool. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get all this scale off and to get it ready so we can do some profiling. With all the scale removed, I'm just going on and making a rough line of where I want my edges to go. This isn't a line I actually follow. This is just to give myself an idea of what I'm looking for. And I'm situating where I want my point and where I want my heel to be. And one of the main reasons why I brought my heel back so much, even though I don't need to bring it up as much, is because I had a crack develop on the edge of the knife when I was forging it, and I need to grind out that crack. And if I had not ground all the crud that was on the edge of the billet before forging out my knife, I would have had a lot more of those cracks all throughout the top and bottom of the blade, which would have caused me to have to grind the actual finished knife a lot thinner. And after doing that, we go on to our heat treat. That's one of the things I like about hidden tank knives. There's a lot less grinding since you don't have to mess with the tank too much. So that's definitely a plus of doing these. Alright guys, so we're out of the timber and the knife is looking pretty nice. You can definitely see some of that patterning starting to pop out. Only thing is that I definitely developed some minor little twisting and warping. And whenever I heat treated it, it looked pretty straight, but after I tempered it, I noticed it was a little wavy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a carbide peen hammer and I'm going to go on ahead and peen it over a bit. And that carbide peen, I'm going to be hitting it and it's going to disperse the steel around it and it should straighten up all these warps. Then we'll get into our final grind. If you're new to knife making or if you just don't have experience with this is a carbide peen ball bearing or ball that's put into this hammer, and all I'm doing is hammering in the hardened blade, and this actually causes it to make little divots since the ball is harder than the actual steel, and that just causes the steel to displace and straighten up. I'm actually hitting the dish portion, and as I'm hitting it, it's actually expanding and causing those portions to wiggle back and forth and get into a better alignment and get nice and straight. It's a lot safer than trying to actually, force it to be straight right after the heat treat, or running the risk of having to re-quench it again and creating more stress fractures, or running the risk of creating stress fractures from hardening it and softening it and hardening it again. Man, that was a tongue twister. And now we're moving on to our finished grinding. Since I forged a lot of it in, there's not really a lot to grind. And I did a decent amount of my grinding beforehand while the steel was a lot softer. So that went pretty quick, and all that's left is to get our hand sanding done. Alright guys, so it's time to start on the handle. I got this piece of olive wood and I got this piece of ebony, and I'm going to be using them together to make my handle for this knife. It's a little bit on the short side for a handle, but I think it's going to be plenty. So we're going to make this work. So now we move on to the handle. All I'm doing is marking some center lines. I put some orange tape on there first just to make it easier to see the markings that I'm making with the pen, and we're going to move on to our drilling process. The bottom piece doesn't really matter as much, so the hole I have a lot more leeway to be able to drill the hole a little bit bigger, but the front piece definitely has to be a lot more precise. I don't do a lot of hidden tanks. A lot of people say that they are easier and they're a lot quicker, and for the most part they are a lot quicker. But I started with full tank knives, and I've been making full tank knives for the majority of the time that I've actually been making knives. So I find that to be a lot faster and a lot easier. But I do see the plus side, I guess, or the good side of doing it like this and doing hidden tank knives. You definitely can get away with using a lot less material to make your knife, which is always a plus, especially if you're low on material. But I just can't get my fit up right. I always make it a little bit bigger than it needs to be, and then I have to fill it up. That's why I always use a darker material, and then I fill up whatever gaps I have with some black glue, and that does the trick. But it's not, it's not perfect, and that really irks me. But I mean, I do the best I can. If I had more specialized machinery, I could probably do a lot better, but it's just one of those where it's just a pain for me. And I don't know if I just don't have the love for the game that some knife makers have. But whenever I spend about an hour fitting up that front part, the part that actually really matters, the one that you see, and then I over fit it, or I stress it a little bit, and the whole piece cracks and I have to start all over again because it's wood, so the materials stress and can fracture. It's it's a little depressing sometimes, but it's part of the craft and I need to learn how to get better at it, so I'm definitely working on that. That's why I'm actually working on forging a set of just mono steel knives, and they're all hidden tang, and I'm gonna have to figure out how to get that right and make a nice repeatable process. Or maybe I just need a teacher to show me how to do it properly. I don't know. But now that I have the handle shaped up, all I'm doing is rounding it over. A lot of people like to do straight lines on their handles. I don't. I like to round mine off, and it works well for me, and that's how I like to do it. So they're my knives, and I do them the way I want to. And we are moving to our etching process, and as you can see, it definitely has a very cool look to it. But we're gonna move on to our coffee, and this is really what's gonna set in those dark colors and make it look very, very, very cool. Although the first one I did looked a little bit better, but the patterning on this one is still pretty cool nonetheless, especially the contrast with the powder and the actual fish hooks. And now moving over to gluing up the handle. This is another step that kind of gets in my nerves. It's trying to get that epoxy to go in there just right, and then it always bubbles up because you're creating a negative in there, and that air has to go somewhere. So I'm definitely thinking about investing in maybe some disposable syringes or something to be able to fill those gaps in a lot better, just make a lot less of a mess. So if you're a knife maker and you make your own, you do your hitting tangs and use syringes, let me know if that works, and I definitely want to give it a try myself. And a link to some syringes wouldn't be bad either. I would appreciate that. And here is a final look at the product. So the knife came out great. It's extremely sharp, and the pattern came out very, very nice. And I'm overall happy with it. More than likely, I end up keeping this knife because it's just cool, and the fit up wasn't the best. But I don't know, I might sell it. Just depends if somebody wants it, I guess. Oh yeah, and don't forget to subscribe and like and do all that stuff. And overall, thank you very much for watching. I greatly appreciate y'all, and I will catch y'all on the next one. Peace.